Hey everyone, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a question that I think trips up pretty much every developer at some point. It can totally paralyze you before you even write a single line of code. How in the world should you structure your React project?
Right? You've been there. I know it. Just staring at that blank project folder, feeling this huge pressure to find the one single perfect way to organize everything. It feels like this massive decision you have to get right from the get-go. And yeah, you are definitely not alone in feeling that. All right, so let's just jump right in. The very first thing we have to do is kind of blow up the whole premise of that question. See, this whole hunt for the perfect structure, it's a myth. And understanding why it's a myth is really the first step toward, just getting stuff done.
And here it is. This is the one thing that should make you just take a deep breath and relax. Unlike some other frameworks out there, React is famously, you could say, unopinionated about this. There are no hard and fast rules you absolutely have to follow. And what does that mean? It means you have the freedom, the flexibility to pick what works best for you and your specific project. So, okay, if there are no rules, where do we even begin? That's the big question, right? Well, the good news is there are a couple of really common, battle-tested approaches that people use. Let's dig into the first one, grouping your project by feature. Just think of this as creating these little self-contained mini apps inside your main app. So the big idea here is super simple. Everything that makes up one piece of your app, like let's say a user profile page, it all lives together. We're talking the component logic, the CSS for it, its own specific tests. They're all just neighbors hanging out in the same folder. So take a look at this example. You see that feed folder? Everything to do with the feed is right there. The main component, the CSS, the tests, it's all bundled up. Same deal for the profile folder. So if you got to work on the feed, you know exactly where to go. No more jumping all over the place in your project trying to find files. So when is this the way to go? Well, this approach is an absolute game changer for bigger, more complex apps. I mean, if your application has really clear, distinct parts, like a feed, a profile, a dashboard, organizing by feature just makes it so much easier to scale and maintain as that project gets bigger and bigger. Okay, on to path number 2. Instead of grouping files by what they do, this other method groups them by what they are. So yeah, let's talk about grouping by type. You've probably seen this one a million times, especially in tutorials. It's super intuitive, right? You just have one big folder for all your components, another one for all your API calls, one for hooks, and so on. It's like that old saying, a place for everything and everything in its place. And you can see it right here. All the different components, your avatar, your feed, your profile, they all live together inside that components folder. Doesn't matter that they do totally different things in the app. And likewise, all your API logic is just neatly tucked away in that API folder. And look, this way has its own perks, for sure. It's fantastic for smaller projects where you're not juggling, hundreds of components yet. It's also super efficient when your brain is just going, okay, I need to find that avatar component. You know exactly which folder to pop open. All right, so we've got 2 pretty solid options on the table, but the million-dollar question is still there. How do you pick? Which one is for you? Let's break down how you can make that call for your next project. When you boil it all down, the choice is really about how your brain works. Do you think about your app in terms of its sections, like the profile section? Or do you think in terms of file types, like where are all my components? One way organizes your code vertically, by feature. The other organizes it horizontally, by type. And let me be clear, neither one is wrong. They're just different ways of looking at the same puzzle.
This little table here really sums it up. You can see by feature organizes by route. Great for larger apps. By file type organizes by, file type, and is really good for smaller ones. Simple as that. Because look, beyond these 2 paths, beyond these 2 ways of thinking, there's actually one principle that's more important than any folder structure you could ever pick. This is it. This is the real golden rule for structuring your code. And that word is co-location. Seriously, this should be your ultimate guide. Just ask yourself this one simple question. When I change this one file, what other files do I almost always have to change with it? The CSS? A custom hook? A test file? The whole goal here is to keep those files that change together. Keep them as close as possible so you're not hunting all over the project. Okay, and before we wrap up, here are some really practical pro tips to keep in mind. First off, Whatever you do, don't create a crazy maze of folders. Keep it shallow, 3, maybe 4 levels deep, max. Second, you gotta know that most big, real-world projects, they end up using a hybrid of both approaches. And finally, and this is the most important one, honestly, just pick something and start coding. Seriously.
And that really brings us to the biggest takeaway from all of this. The absolute best structure is the one that lets you start writing code. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Don't let the idea of a perfect structure become the enemy of just making progress. Pick a path, get building. You can always refactor and change things later on as you figure out what the project really needs. So at the end of the day, this whole thing isn't about finding some perfect, rigid system that you have to follow forever. It's about understanding these patterns as tools in your toolbox, tools to help you write cleaner, more maintainable code. So the real question isn't what's the perfect structure, it's what structure are you going to confidently start with today?